So very good afternoon all. Welcome to this lunchtime webinar. So my name is James Lessingham. I am committee member for the Programme Management SIG. I'm really pleased to be here with you today for this lunchtime webinar. I'm going to keep my introduction as short as possible to allow these guys as much time as we can fit into the next hour for the content today. Today's webinar is titled A Marriage Made in Heaven, How Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, or ED&I, and Project Management Can Be Lived on Earth. Unless you're a specialist in equality, diversity and inclusion, the subject can seem quite confusing. The common message we hear amongst our peers is that project management and ED&I do not tend to be the best bedfellows in an organisation. Project management is often used as a tool for core strategic programs, whereas ED&I agenda can often be tagged alongside like a distant relative. Jaspal and Amit will be sharing their experience on which has shown that this is not true. Project management can be very effective, not just in helping clear the mist sometimes surrounds ED&I, but also in helping embed the ED&I best practice within an organisation. What's more, ED&I can also improve organisational effectiveness if it's embedded in all stages of the project management cycle, or even a love affair waiting to happen. This webinar will explore why it's important to not work in silos. Acknowledging and embracing a spirit of interdependence is vital for success and making a positive impact on any agenda we're working on. We know it's challenging bringing together conflicting ways of working, styles and processes when engaging on a project or aiming for a common goal. However, the benefits are far greater. The same goes for challenges of ED&I. Managing differences in an organisation is not easy or for the faint-hearted. Hence the need for organisations to give structure to ED&I through effective project management. Marrying the two agendas can increase collaborative working, cross-team knowledge sharing, building leadership skills across levels of employees involved, keeping work interesting that helps with employee engagement and hence improves productivity. Now I will hand over to Amit, who will kick off today's session.
Thank you so much, James. It's a pleasure to be working with APM and indeed Jaspal on this subject. And really, this is kind of co-created learning because coming to the conclusions that we haven't been in isolation. It hasn't been between Amit and Jaspal. It's been with the organisations that we work with and indeed the case study organisation, which is the Bar Standards Board, and reaping some of the benefits of that. But by no means is it an easy journey, as we mentioned, as James had said, trying to bring about change with different styles of working can be quite a challenge. However, we've got some key questions for you. We have 3 questions, and we'd like you to complete, if possible, answer these. And the first one is, do you find ED&I to be a bit of a minefield? So it'd be really helpful if you could share your thoughts with us. And we've got, at the moment, a lot of people saying yes. We have 27 people saying yes and 8 saying no, which is great because there are some other people, obviously, who have some experience within equality, diversity and inclusion and project management. So questions and thoughts and solutions to the opportunity here would be really helpful. There is a blue bar which is highlighting some of the challenges that many organizations experience when trying to lead on equality, diversity and inclusion. In the leadership science world, it's called a wicked problem. That is an official term, and it means it's messy, it's difficult, and it means it can be really challenging to get under the skin of creating impact, moving beyond initiatives and window dressing. So thank you very much for that, but we can see a clear indication there that quite a few people do find it challenging. Thank you. So what is the most difficult aspect of EDI for you? So I love seeing intersectionality right at the top there, because that is such a challenge for diversity and really trying to think about strategies which embrace multiple identities that people have. So absolutely right. And that links to the wicked problem of diversity, the messy problem. As soon as we bring intersectionality of identity, thought diversity and personality, it adds to the layers of complexity. Terminology, absolutely right. We can recognize that their language is dynamic. And that means that things change often and people are on the back foot about what words they can say, can't say, whether they're going to offend someone. And I think that is a real barrier that could do with another webinar in itself. Political correctness, and that links to terminology as well, and identifying what's good political correctness and what's bad. I'm going to take a few. Engagement, absolutely right. So how do we engage people in the right way, particularly when there's a culture of fear about saying the wrong thing, looking at the issues again of terminology and PC. Conflict with the strategy, evaluating and measuring, absolutely. A lot of organizations measure their diversity commitments based on outputs and outcomes and not necessarily impact. So it's important that we get the right project management frameworks in to really measure impact, which can be in itself quite difficult. And the one I also love on here, I wish I could speak to each of these here, which is changing mindset. And that is quite difficult for people because we get stuck in our own way of being, our own way of thinking, our own biases, and often it's difficult for us to be able to shift from that. Essentially, ED&I is about change management on a personal level, on a cultural level, and on a structural level. And we get very clever in our work to justify our behaviors based on this is how it's already been done, or I've not been called out about it. So really important that we think about a change and growth mindset, Carol Dweck's word, which is, how do we achieve a growth mindset with ED&I? Thank you so much for that. We're going to start our session with, our heading, and we have called it a kind of marriage made in heaven here, because we recognize when people get married, there are challenges, there are issues, there are things which all seem lovely when two people come together. And as things go on, things can become a bit challenging. We start to question each other, we start to question ourselves, our identities get reshaped. And it's the same for diversity and inclusion work when it's merging with an organization or a new structure, which is kind of different to how ED&I practices traditionally been run. So here we are trying to achieve, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, a bit like a weather storm. I'm sitting here looking outside and the rain is coming down on me. It's now becoming a bit sunny. So how do we kind of weather that storm in a way which is transformative for individuals and organizations having an impact? Okay, so, why ED&I and project management must work together. So on the left here, we have, all of the things which are good for ED&I, and on the right, we have for project management. But I'm going to start off with a story, and it's a very short story, but very interesting in terms of commitment to ED&I. There was an organization I was working with, and I was employed as a consultant to deliver disability training. What had happened was the leader of the department had come into the training session where I was setting up my papers and all of the activities that I was needing for a 4-hour session. The leader comes in with his team and says, Amit, really nice to meet you. However, there's a bit of a challenge we've got. And I said, okay, what's your challenge? He goes, we can't do 4 hours because we've got so many things going on in the organization right now. We've lost a member of our team. There are some of the deadlines we need to meet. And, we're all reasonably kind of effective leaders here. So do we really need these 4 hours? Can you cut it down for us? And I said, well, not really, because the session is for 4 hours. It's about best practice and also about compliance for the organization, as I've been employed for 4 hours. So unfortunately, we're going to have to continue on. Now, you can probably imagine he set up that training on the back foot slightly, because he went back to his team and said, sorry, team, we're going to have to sit here for 4 hours, understanding disability awareness and how it links to a leadership framework in the organization, etc. So I had a group of people which weren't really kind of then committed to the whole training experience, which can make it challenging for a trainer. I know everybody attending today, are not in those shoes. What happened was interesting. Session finished. 4 months down the line, I was teaching other diversity subject on another campus of the organization. And I met the leader who was from my session, and he stopped me and he goes, Amit, can we have a conversation? I goes, look, I'm around this building for, the next day or so. And he goes, look, I'm going to be here too. Can you come and see me in this office? So I went to see him. And I said, how can I help you? And he said to me that he's had a big change of heart for implementing ED&I work in the organization. I said, well, what happened? Was it because of my training? He goes, well, it was because of your training. And there's another issue that has taken place in my life. And I go, okay, what is it? And he said, my son is a student of sport, ended up in a sporting injury, at the university he was studying at, which left his son in a wheelchair. Now, his commitment for equality, diversity, and inclusion just transformed. It propelled to heights which even he wasn't expecting, because he turned this into something that was very personal to him. So that's my call. That's our call here, that any issue that other people face in their life, regardless of whether you are part of that identity or not, is an issue for ourselves. And the more we personalize diversity and inclusion, the better we're able to drive an agenda in an organization which is better for ourselves and everyone. And project management supports us, then gives some structure to some of the commitments we need. We get very good as leaders to tick the box of diversity, express good intentions, obviously, try and have some initiatives in an organizations that assume to work, but do we really personalize it where we can actually be a transformative leader, driving change, cultural change, challenging in safe spaces, and also holding ourselves and others accountable. So that's just one very brief case study. It also, when you have good ED&I practice in an organization, we all build better psychological contract with our employees, which automatically leads to better performance. In an organization I work for, somebody asked me, Amit, why do you not put your food on hot days in the fridge? I explained to them that I'm a bit uncomfortable in terms of environments where there's meat kept, so I just keep my food to myself. It's not a problem. It's all good. The next day I arrive into the office, the manager had ordered a very small fridge where I could keep my food, probably cost the organization £60. But what that did was actually show a practical activity around diversity, which built psychological contract. It means my commitment was fully in. Less sickness and staff turnover. Research has shown again that the people who are discriminated in organizations are likely to be more sick and likely to leave the organization. And where we have ED&I right, it means that we have more retention in an organization. Where we have lack of psychological contract, I've just kind of mentioned it, engagement and exit essentially could be the outcome. Legislative compliance, and I believe that it is important for organizations to have legislative compliance, particularly because we have a case study from the BSP here. But at the same time, that shouldn't be just the reason for us to be able to drive equality, diversity, and inclusion. It is one opportunity for us to be able to influence an agenda, but it shouldn't be one that's just as the one that is relied upon. Also, everyone benefits from inclusivity. Sometimes when we speak about equality, diversity, and inclusion, we feel it is just for those underrepresented groups. But actually, if we get inclusivity right, everybody benefits in an organization. It goes without saying, improved public image, and also builds trust with employees. And it moves an organization beyond the tick box. And we really need to kind of understand the link between trust and moving the organization beyond activities of expression, which are promoted internally, but not followed through. So the two things go hand in hand. On the right here, which is why we're, kind of linking the two aspects together. All of these wonderful things around equality and diversity can happen in an organization. However, what we want to try and achieve is giving some structure around it. Often we see organizations which have an ED&I strategy, which is led by an ED&I team or specialist, and hasn't really been anchored into program management structures in an organization, which then allows clarity and focus, direction, structure, setting very clear objectives, accountability, measuring impact, and buy-in of our stakeholders. So what tends to happen is ED&I, as James had said, can be a poor cousin of the main strategic efforts of an organization to drive their corporate objectives. And what we want to see here are the two things coming together to benefit each other. There's also something that project management gains from ED&I is really understanding what are the equality, diversity, and inclusion considerations that project managers and project management needs to consider when establishing projects. So the two things are supportive of each other, and it creates a win-win dynamic. And we all know when we create a win-win dynamic, a marriage is more likely to be successful.
This brings us to why we wanted to also do this webinar. Look, we can have a theoretical talk about the benefits EDI can bring to an organization and why project management can help, but to actually provide a worked example and a case study. I thought that is something people would actually appreciate more. Now, in terms of who the BSB is, the BSB is the legal regulator of barristers in England and Wales. We have the responsibility for setting standards with regards how barristers train, and also to ensure that the bar remains a profession that can be equally accessed by all and serves the needs of society. So needless to say, EDI has a big role to play in this. I am using the Bar Standards Board as an example here, but rest assured, folks, the good practice we're hoping to share can be implemented in any organization. We, of course, had a problem in that we just had too much going on in the organization because we didn't just want to improve our own internal EDI good practice, but also set the tone for the profession. But if there's no structure around this, then it becomes difficult to measure impact and be accountable. So in my mind, project management was crucial because it could provide the solution in terms of bringing order, clarity, and unified direction to all the EDI work we were and currently are undertaking. And therefore, project management is really key to embedding diversity. We had a lot of work going on, still do, so I decided a program structure with individual projects would work best for us, but please rest assured, start with where you feel comfortable with just a project and build upon that into your portfolio. For us, this just made sense to have a program structure. So how does having a program or project management structure help embed ED&I? Firstly, in terms of the membership of the program board, all members of the senior management team at the Bar Standards Board are members of the Equality and Access to Justice Program Board. Now, I will admit this is a little bit unusual because at the BSB, we have quite a few program boards, and often not all directors are members of all of them. But EDI is cross-cutting across all departments, and hence I wanted every single director to be a member. This also sends a clear message to the rest of the organization that this is the program with a commitment of the entire SMT, right? Now, having a program structure also means there are clearly defined outcomes for the program in terms of what EDI change we are looking to implement. Having a committed sponsor, champion the vision that is strongly endorsed by the Director General and by the whole of the senior management team will be a good way for stakeholders to know that we are serious about delivering EDI changes and the benefits it will bring. We also have a clearly defined project management framework in the organization, where the roles and responsibilities of the project sponsor versus the PM are defined. So there is always complete clarity about who is doing what. This, I find, has really helped when resources are stretched. We don't need people to duplicate efforts. Now, whether you call it your project charter or your mandate or your PID, a PID by any other name, in my opinion, but these are crucial documents. And what I've done is we have customized our PID templates to include sections where an equality impact assessment form needs to be filled in as part of that process of initiating a project. And even a data protection initiation assessment needs to be done from the outset so that we can better understand what taking on this proposed piece of work could have on the groups that we are going to be working with. And what this means for us is that EIAs then do not become a mere afterthought. And that way, we are starting off projects fully taking into account all the ramifications, and from a risk perspective, that very much helps mitigate against project failure. Now, I know I'm speaking to the converted, but the structure that a well-drafted PID template brings is really important because, as you know, it provides a foundation with which to assess the problem, engage and secure the buy-in of stakeholders. So timelines can be detailed, risk can be assessed, and we can be very sure that the goals are clear and we know who is doing what. We can build in review points via milestones and assess progress on a regular basis and change course if needed. Yeah, and by giving our EDI work, therefore, a program structure, we give a very clear message that this work matters as much as our other programs of work. And it is a core part of the business and not a simply nice to have thing. Staff have therefore given this the same level of commitment and attention as their other work. We also have a network of EDI champions across the organization. They have been trained to be the first port of call for localized EDI issues, and they are trained to provide EDI advice. Every single department has an EDI officer which meets regularly to discuss good practice, troubleshoot, and to discuss tricky EDI issues. This way, EDI is being discussed at all levels in the organization, from the program board, senior management team, and also throughout the whole organization via the EDI champions. Most importantly, as we know, change must be managed. And I feel having a program or project structure takes away some of the fear that change sometimes brings to an organization. Why? Because we are increasing transparency of what the change will entail, and most importantly, what benefits we will achieve by bringing about these EDI changes. As a portfolio manager who has also gone over to the dark side of change management, I think it is fair to say that both change and project professionals agree. Hearts and minds need to be engaged for the change to take place and fully embed. And in that sense, I think change models can be very useful because they help us understand how to overcome resistance. And my suggestion is always to first assess how knowledge is spread across your organization. Is yours more a top-down organization, or does it have a more flat structure? Because that will help determine how your EDI message can best be spread and embedded. Let's be honest, EDI, right, can often involve big changes, and a project management framework, therefore, can be a good way in which to manage that change and make it less scary. Now, EDI changes, in my opinion, do not happen overnight. They're quite often cultural. So therefore, having a developed program plan or a project plan that maps out what is to be achieved in each of the tranches and ensures that this becomes a program of work that can be sustainably delivered over time. Because if not...
Thank you, Jaspal. And absolutely right. If not, EDI is hijacked by initiatives in organization. And that's a good way for organizations getting away with not really committing to a more in-depth equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion program. Research has shown that organizations run to initiatives as an opportunity to window dress a commitment by the organization. So we really need to be thinking about the initiatives, although with good intentions, how they can become part of a more structured approach in an organization to give them some weight, recognition, and indeed accountability, which is the next point. And people need to be held accountable. The organization, often BSB is a regulator, and hold other people accountable, and also accountable to their regulator. So by putting a project management structure around things means that you can have better accountability for EDI practice. And if you don't, it's very difficult to truly embed. Now, we hear a lot about ED&I embedding in organizations, and often that can be quite difficult, but what does it actually mean? And if we can't really measure where we are truly embedding ED&I, it's difficult to actually ensure that things are really changing, as Jaspal had mentioned. It's a change management kind of area of work. So we really need some structure around embedding ED&I through project management processes. Well, that's what certainly we advocate for, and our case study has shown that this is something to prove to be of benefit. I've already mentioned about evaluating and measuring impact. Just to kind of re-emphasize that point again, I've gone into a number of organizations, either as an in-house diversity person or as a consultant. And people find the impact measurement piece quite difficult, and we get stuck in outputs. For example, we're putting on training, and therefore we've had 300 people attend our training, or we've made it mandatory and everybody's attended, or 7,000 people, and they judge it by how many people have participated by way of output, not necessarily then thinking about how is this really contributing to some of the culture change that's needed in an organization. So there's something about particular tools that are needed from a project management framework about how do we actually look at impact, which is different from measuring outputs. And often, how do we ensure that project management approaches kind of also have inclusivity and thought diversity integrated within project management structures? For example, the work that Jaspal had mentioned, all of the project initiation documents all have an equality impact assessment in there. So then when I'm setting up a team, is it that I've just got those people as part of my project team who think, feel and look like me? Are they the type of people that I want, and they're all men? Or I've actually thought about embracing difference within that and the challenge and the opportunity that can actually bring a project in an organization. And also there's the issue of discrimination. And often we can speak about equality, diversity and inclusion in a way which is quite comfortable. But in essence, what we're trying to achieve here is the minimization or elimination of discrimination in an organization. So as much as possible, let's try and be honest and open about some of the issues of discrimination that take place and try to address them head on. And also it moves us away from having group think. So often, if you don't have good project management, it can sustain group think in an organization. And you will see that in many teams and groups and organizations where they get stuck in a way of working, and anything outside of that which is different can be challenging for the organization. So what we want to do is to kind of come out of that. ED&I and project management together provides an opportunity to challenge some of that as part of the processes.
Wonderful. So just to wrap up with some top tips to help embed ED&I in an organization. Firstly, let's create a safe space in which to talk about these issues, because this helps ensure that everyone can share their fears and concerns and discuss these matters in a way that is non-judgmental. Have the equality and diversity message championed across all levels in the organization. Let's face it, it is everyone's responsibility to spread the ED&I message. And as project professionals, we especially are privileged because we work with such a wide variety of teams in the course of our everyday workings. We are in a very good way to be at the forefront of spreading this message. We need to build ED&I questions into our project templates, a project management framework that encompasses ED&I considerations at all stages of the project lifecycle will ensure that these are not just merely afterthoughts. And very importantly, right, have regular activities in the organization, whether these be knowledge share sessions or workshops or seminars to increase ED&I organizational knowledge on an ongoing basis, because this will help maintain program momentum and enthusiasm. One of my favorite quotes from Marie Curie is when she said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood." And in my mind, that makes so much sense, because by understanding and taking the fear away from ED&I via the use of good communication and project management tools, this gives us the ability to create environments that are inclusive, productive, and ultimately happier working spaces where people can thrive and grow together. And therefore, in my mind, project management is the perfect way to work with ED&I practices symbiotically to create a better society. There you go, folks.
Great. Thank you, Jaspal. Wonderful. Well, we've had some really interesting questions, and I know James in the background has had probably a lot of reading, speed reading to actually do to capture some of the kind of thoughts. So I'll give James an opportunity to kind of just guide us through this. But one of the things that I'm just going to take, James, if I may, because I saw a question which I wanted to respond to, is that all right? It's that point about the low-hanging fruit and getting people to participate with equality and diversity programs where you get 20% of the people in the organization participating, but 80% tend not to be involved. And I think that's a really good question. One of the things that I say when I'm consulting for organizations is, have you got your accountability framework right? Have you got your HR processes right? Where right at interview, people recognize that equality, diversity, or equity, diversity, and inclusion is something which is important for the organization. People will be measured on it like any other aspect of their work objectives. If I don't meet my work objectives, management have a conversation with me about it, or I have a conversation with my team members. Why don't we apply the same principles to equality, diversity, and inclusion when it particularly is a key area which organizations are striving towards? It's one of the regulatory objectives indeed for the Bar Standards Board. So how do we ensure that people are measured for the contributions that they make? And therefore people know at interview stage that this is something, and this is the culture of the organization, and put performance measurements around it. James, I'll let you lead us now with questions.
Yeah, brilliant. I have been capturing a few as we were going through, and there has been some really good discussion. So thank you for engaging. And as we go through some of these questions, please do feel free to pop any further questions you have in the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go. But I have picked a few up as we've been talking through. So I'll start off one, Ashok. I'm unsure some people would be happy with giving others an advantage over them, i.e. job posted should be based on ability and competence, not numbers, i.e. 50-50 men, women. What would you say to those people?
Do you want me to take that one?
That's a beautiful one for you. Come now.
Thank you, Ashok, for that question. And I was looking through the chat, and I also saw that somebody was playing devil's advocate, and I'm not sure whether that was you. I think it was, but that's what ED&I practice is about, is actually applying critical thinking to our work. You're absolutely right. I mean, in this country, compared to America, we don't have a program for affirmative action, but we do have something for positive action. So that means creating equity, because that's another question that's come through the chat, creating an equal playing field for underrepresented groups to participate, and recognizing some of those barriers and applying positive action approaches to mitigate some of the barriers that underrepresented or disadvantaged groups face. So that's a kind of framework of positive action. What isn't appropriate or legal in this country, except in an exceptional circumstance, is when you set targets which are not based on historical underrepresentation and a pattern of that in an organization, and giving people a role which is just based on their identity over the competencies that they have. So hopefully that answers your question, Ashok, but you're absolutely right. And some people can get very confused about that and feel that ED&I is about giving favors to particular people. But actually, the way society and organizations are structured, they often favor the majority anyway. So there's something there about bringing balance into our thinking around positive action approaches.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that answers a few questions that we had there. I know Ian, Ashok were having a bit of a conversation, and two other questions that I had noted down, and I think you've just ticked both of those off at the same time.
Oh, good.
So a question for Jaspal. You were talking about your EDI champions. Do you train your EDI champions internally or bring someone in to do the training?
So we have trained them internally, James, because our previous head of ENAG, Amit Popat, and our current head are able to do this. But you do need an EDI professional, someone who's comfortable dealing with these questions, and be able to train and provide a good agenda to be able to guide this network of EDI champions in an organization. So you do need a subject matter expert. We are just very fortunate that we have had this in-house. But if you don't, by all means, that is the first step. It's not the only step. When you have an EDI subject matter expert, they are helping you open the door, but it is, in my opinion, then up to you to implement and carry on the changes that they may suggest you take forward.
Yeah, and can I respond to that a bit as well, Jaspal? So in
please.
any organization where they have EDI champions, what can happen? So the shadow of that is the EDI champion then becomes the person where all of the EDI issues are loaded onto, and that shouldn't happen. What should happen is that the director of the department should be actively supporting that champion as part of their objective, because otherwise it becomes a pigeonholed process. So rather than it becoming embedded at a local level, it can become counterproductive. So really important that the directors are held accountable for the EDI champions in the organization, give them the space and the time to actually do the work that they are tasked to do.
Thank you. And just on the training piece, a question from myself really is, how far does the training, or does your training go? You've mentioned training ED&I champions. Is there training packages available for other stakeholders within the organisation?
A really good one, James. We have done this. I mean, Amit, do you want to talk about some of the training you did previously?
Yeah.
For example, even for the board.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a training program in the organization, and we have two types of training which organizations embrace, including the BSB. One was informal opportunities. Jaspal had mentioned knowledge sharing sessions. And that was because the organization, when I joined the BSB, they already had knowledge sharing sessions. So it was actually linking into an organizational approach which was already understood. And we invited external speakers or internal speakers to speak about their ED&I specialist area. So that created an informal environment. It was networking. It was people coming together from across all of the different teams in the organization. So that was part of the training courses that we ran in the organization, which had external speakers, and we managed to do that at low cost. So try and pull on friends and connections that you have, and if you don't, it's okay to pay people as well if you need a particular area of specialism in that meeting. The other area was anti-discriminatory practice training. Note that I made that a bit more clearer on the point that I made in the presentation, which is around tackling discrimination, which is the core fundamental value of equality and diversity practice, which is what we should all be aiming for. And we provided equality and diversity training and equality impact assessment training to all people in the organization, including committees, the board, etc. Organizations also use e-learning packages because sometimes they want to just give people an introduction, but the best training is in-house or face-to-face, where you have people internally driving some of that, or if needed, getting people from the external environment because they can challenge a bit more some of the behaviors which have been a bit ingrained because of groupthink and historical practices. Because it's a change management process, ED&I, training needs to be able to kind of manage some of that in the right way. So training shouldn't be used as a tick box for an organization to say this is something that we're doing for ED&I and compartmentalize it in that way. But I would say a plethora of initiatives in an organization is always good, and having a good training needs analysis done to support that.
And in a way, just as how there's a network of EDI champions in the organization, we also have a network of project managers in the organization, which we have similarly trained. And there is a beautiful crossover there. There are many PMs in the organization who are also EDI champions. And this helps ensure, right, in that sense, that none of that agenda and knowledge is lost.
Yeah.
We take it forward symbiotically.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both. Next question from Dave Fitzpatrick. What are the different challenges in implementing ED&I in BAU compared to programs?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say I think that well, they both have their pros and cons, don't they? With a program structure, you need to set things up. You need to have accountability. You need to have delivery mechanisms. But in a way that gives you the comfort of knowing that if you meet regularly, if there are program or project board meetings, if you do minutes, decision points can be captured and spread across the organization. With BAU, there's sometimes a danger, in my opinion, of it being lost, the EDI agenda being lost amongst the 100,000 other things you also need to do. Now, I was just quickly scrolling through the chat message on the side, and there was a really helpful message that said, have an EDI agenda point in your meetings at a regular on a regular basis if you're doing this for BAU, and why not do that? Because yes, it should be something at the forefront of everyone's mind. And if you cannot set up a program or project board with regard this, that's fine. Just build it into your normal work agenda.
Yeah.
But
Just
that's
to
the
top and
important thing. That's it. Don't let it be divorced from the work you do on a regular basis. What do you say, Amit?
yes, just to top and tail that, Jaspal, thank you for that. Also, it's about leadership behaviors, making it business as usual in an organization.
Yes.
And it can be very simple, from leaders in the organizations checking on people's needs when they come to a meeting. Are you comfortable with taking a flight of stairs? We've got a lift here, and making sure that when we're engaging with our stakeholders, that comes right from the top of the organization. When people see that, other people are likely to follow. So I agree with that point around embedding E&D and inclusion into programs, but that can also be a vehicle to make it as normal practice in an organization, and vice versa. It's a bit like a chicken and an egg situation.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both. And Jaspal, I really like that point actually about baking it into BAU, bring it in as a point at the start of meetings. And the organisation at the moment, safety is a really big part, and we have a safety moment at the start of meetings. And actually more frequently, we're starting to introduce the ED&I as well. It's kind of that two-part.
Right.
Certainly draws up conversation at the very least, which is really good.
And I think you're so right there, James, because the more we talk about it, the more we understand, for example, what we do not understand. And it gives us an opportunity to discuss these things, to clarify and further our growth and knowledge as an organization.
Yeah, brilliant. So next question then comes from Sebastian. You can probably see it in chat there. I would expect there is a cost attached to generate advantage for some to achieve equality. I also believe it can be justified by the benefits / performance of the project. How do you quantify the initial investment to provide required advantages for those who may need them?
Okay, so that's quite interesting. This can be quite difficult because sometimes to try and quantify EDI impact can be quite difficult. But you can certainly quantify the cost and weigh that against the benefit and do a cost-benefit analysis in that sense. And it's quite important to know that EDI changes, when embedded in an organization, if they do continue to be embedded, will keep giving. So your initial layout costs may, for example, be high. You may have to train people in the organization. You may have to hire an EDI consultant. But the benefits that you will continue to reap throughout the organization could very quickly and easily outweigh the costs. Also bearing in mind, for example, like we mentioned, the benefits that EDI brings in terms of creating a more inclusive culture that people then want to stay at that organization. If there is less staff turnover, for example, people leave when they're unhappy with organizational culture sometimes. And think about, for those of us that do recruiting and interviewing, how painful that process can be when you lose someone who's key to the team. Having to hire someone, you embed them, get them up to speed. If you can prevent that happening by keeping people included, I think that really helps. And that's a huge benefit that's often not quantified enough. What do you say, Amit? That's
I
just my
agree to
take.
all of that, so I'm agreeing to all of it. I won't add much apart from, it's like any other piece of practice in an organization, like health and safety. It's the same challenge that we have there, that, how do we actually look at the investment based on then what are we getting out of that? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. That was all the questions that I had. So unless there's any further that comes in.
I'm just very grateful to everyone, really. I'm just looking at the amount of engagement in the chat. I haven't fully caught up, but thank you. It's really nice to see everyone so engaged and contributing their thoughts to the discussion.
Charlotte's question is, could you share some more best practice? So Charlotte, do you mean about ED&I and project management, or do you mean about a particular area of ED&I? PIDs, wonderful. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. So what we've done at the BSB, or what happened at the BSB, was that all of the project initiation documents had equality, inclusion and diversity considerations as part of it. So it encouraged every individual who's working on a particular project or program to have those considerations. That was supported by equality impact assessments. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you here. That is a best practice approach, but it doesn't mean it's easy, because a lot of people, they don't always recognize the wider benefits of ED&I in their work because they're not held accountable for it. So why should they be doing something which seems a bit processy? So it's really important that the organization has good communication strategy around some of these subject areas, which could be quite dry. So where best practice comes in is to ensure that any work that you do in the organization, Elizabeth has said that I find upskilling around E&I really tough. You're absolutely right. That is supported by a good communication strategy and followed through by people at the top of the organization. So when the directors are running any projects, they're leading, they are actually starting to do some of the EIAs themselves. That sends a message to people in the organization that this is something serious. Often you find that people high up in an organization will pass that on to other people in the hierarchy. But what we want to see is best practice. People follow behaviors when we speak about change management, not necessarily instruction. So that's one way of actually ensuring that best practice is implemented in an organization. I hope that helps.
I mean, I remember when I was looking at our different project management templates in the organization at one point, and I remember our data protection officer calling me, really being very, very frustrated, because saying, look, Jaspal, this project was initiated with absolutely no DPIA considerations taken on board. And the amount of times I had heard that message from Amit as well made me realize this is a really serious issue, because the ramifications of that can be really far-reaching. So I thought, right, this is where we will change things slightly. Our project templates have got screening forms for both, as Amit said, for EIA key questions and for DPIA questions. So when we have the PID, when we have our concept papers written, we are presenting a holistic perspective of what this project entails. Everyone who's going to be affected, you know, and the ramifications this could have. And this way, right, we manage risk better, we engage stakeholders better, and everyone sort of understands better what they're getting into and the part they need to play. That is so important.
I didn't know if we had anything else left on Menti.
Oh, that's it. We've got
the
one
third
more.
One. Absolutely. This was the third one that we promised at the beginning. Yes. It would be great for you to answer. Are you now convinced about how ED&I and project management can be mutually beneficial? Right.
This is rather flattering, I think. And if we've taken the first step to try and show the link, then I'm really happy that we've done this.
Well, that's above 25 potential good case studies happening outside in the wider world. Let's wait and see. 30, great, wonderful. So we've obviously supported some awareness around this agenda. This has been about an introduction to the subject, so I'm sure that there are other opportunities to kind of build on this and really start to think about going a bit deeper into some of the specific issues and challenges that you've mentioned in your chat. The chat box has been really helpful, actually. Yes. Hopefully we've been able to kind of respond to that in a positive way, but also we have learned from some of your questions. So thank you so much for bringing some of your thoughts into this webinar, or webinar, should I say.
And James, can I please say a big thank you to yourself for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to share our knowledge with the wider project and ED&I profession. It's been really very enjoyable.
And thank you for putting this on, and thank you for speaking today. I suppose just as a way of wrap up, a big thank you to you both.
Wonderful.
So thank you everyone for attending today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. See you soon. Bye.